Welcome to the GDL podcast, episode number 10. I'm your host, Kyle Warner. Today we're talking sleep, caffeine, and performance. We have a very special guest with us here to discuss, Major Allison Brager, PhD. She's currently a neuroscientist and sleep expert for the United States Army, as well as member of the Army Warrior Fitness Team. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy. And if you guys haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. Thanks. Major Brager, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's awesome to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited you're here. I figured we'd start with your job. You have easily one of the coolest and most unique jobs in the military. So can you take us through your journey from becoming a neuroscientist and talk about what role you play in the Army's mission today?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I am very grateful and very blessed for what I do. It actually goes back to what somebody once told me in grad school, which is to plan your career around your lifestyle and not your lifestyle around your career. And I feel like I've mastered that. And honestly, like work doesn't feel like work to me, even if I work like 60 hours a week, which is, pretty normal. It doesn't feel like work because I do what I love. So I always knew I wanted to be a scientist. I was always fascinated by the brain, mostly because of a family history of Alzheimer's and various psychiatric issues. And so when it came to research, again, just trying to put my passions into practice, I was always interested in exercise, how the human body could push itself through really intense training and survival in extreme environments. And I'm a basic nerd. So I have like biochemical structures tattooed on my forearm. So I was always interested in like the chemical reactions that were happening within the brain. So that's how I got into neuroscience and got to specialize in sleep research and then also circadian rhythms research, which is looking at like the timing of physiological processes and endocrine systems, which of course feed into exercise, right? Mm-hmm. So I've spent most of my career looking at people and situations where somebody is resilient or sensitive to conditions of extreme high stress. Whether it's sleep deprivation. I used to do work in ultra endurance athletes. We've done work down in Antarctica at the research station there. And we've looked at genetic underlines of sensitivity and resiliency. Turns out that your genetic DNA blueprint actually has a huge bearing on whether or not you're sensitive or resilient in these situations of high stress. Which is a topic for another day, right?
Right.
So given those topics, right, it makes perfect sense that the military would be interested in all these things. You want humans who could survive in austere conditions, and you want to select a group of individuals who are very resilient in these situations. So that's how I became a neuroscientist for the Army. I actually started working for the Army as a civilian. I was there on a fellowship from the National Academies of Sciences, but I had always wanted to serve. So I was a collegiate athlete, but when I was getting recruited in college for track and field, I was getting recruited by the military academies, and West Point was my top choice. But then 9/11 happened when I was a junior, and my parents were like, "Oh no, you're not going to West Point." It ended up working out for me. I went to Brown, which, is also a very good school. But I had always had that aspiration of wanting to serve. Tried to do OCS with the Marines when I was at Brown, but then I had a foot injury from track and field. And back then in the early 2000s, a foot injury was definitely a no-go for joining the service, even if I was, a Division I collegiate athlete in track and field, but still. So anyway, I got this job at the Army. I had a really good mentor who was like, "Hey, you'd be a great Army officer." So he helped facilitate direct commissioning me. So I came back, 9 months later in uniform as a scientist. I worked at the storied Walter Reed Army Institute of Research in DC, which, of course, is in the news today because they were part of developing the Moderna COVID vaccine.
Yep.
That's a lot of the research they do is they've developed most of the vaccinations that exist in the world since, the Institute was formed in the early 1900s. And then after that, so I've done CrossFit for 11 years. I've a CrossFit OG. I actually started CrossFit through Dan Bailey. So
Very cool.
Dan Bailey and I grew up together. And I was lucky in that I did my graduate work at Kent State. And so I was around that whole community of Dan and Julie Fouché and Lisa Shue and Charlie Dunifer, who are like old school athletes from the Central East back in the day.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into CrossFit, moved to Atlanta for my fellowship, and started training with the MAJ Bragers. Got my ass kicked every day by Emily. But it was all good because I ended up competing twice in regionals as an individual. And then I was on a games team twice out of CrossFit Terminus in 13. And then our team went to the games again in 15. So, that being said, like I was still doing CrossFit when I was in the Army. And then I don't know if like the Army gods were listening to my prayers or what, but the Army decided they were going to form a CrossFit team, which we call the Army Warrior Fitness Team. It's comprised of CrossFit and strongman competitors. But now we're expanding into different strength and athletic spaces as well, bringing on some Olympic lifters and power lifters. But yeah, so I tried out for the team, made it, and then that brought me here to Fort Knox, Kentucky, which is where the Army Warrior Fitness Training Facility is. And so, yeah, I compete as a full-time CrossFit athlete on behalf of the Army, and I've been lucky enough to shape a research program, again, around human performance around the team. And actually, we have esports too. So both esports and the Army Warrior Fitness Team are used as recruiting avenues for Generation Z because, especially esports, right? Like that's all the hype with the young kids. And so for obviously me as a neuroscientist, it's a perfect fit, right? To leverage esports to help augment cognitive training in soldiers because sure, I'm biased, right? Because I'm a neuroscientist, but I think, people forget the brain can be trained like a muscle, and it's obviously like the most important organ of the body. And so that's a lot of what we do is trying to leverage this so that soldiers can be just better like athletes all around, right? So when you think about athletics, it's not just physical. There's the cognitive piece too. Like having a very fast reaction time is the difference between making it to the pros or being a Division III collegiate athlete. Like, to be honest with you, all sports, right? Hand-eye coordination, dexterity, all of that. So agility. So yeah, I am very lucky in that I think I finally have mastered the planning my career around, my lifestyle, but it's been great.
Well, I'm so excited to leverage some of your experience here today. I think there's a lot of information out there and a lot of misinformation about sleep and performance. So I'm excited to get to hear what the real deal is.
Yeah, and you got me on the perfect day too, right? Because it's the shortest day of the year, and so our sleep is only going to markedly improve from here on out because sad, seasonal affective disorder is a real thing.
Yeah. And I wish I could take credit for the scheduling, but I can't. But I guess where this started was, so I was an Army officer for a couple of years, got out, we had my daughter, we started a family. And then I read Why We Sleep by Dr. Walker,
Yep.
and it scared the hell out of me because I didn't realize how important sleep was to every aspect of my life. So, big picture for people who don't understand, and let's not even just talk about athletes, but for everyday people, why is sleep so important? What things does it affect?
So sleep, there's no universal function of sleep. It
Okay.
literally affects every single physiological process of your body. So Matt Walker was not joking about that. He actually, my best friend, trained in Matt's lab, and it's that's what we've shown over the years as researchers is the physical as well as the mental decline that comes with sleep. And it's not so much sleep amount, but sleep quality. So a lot of these issues arise not because people aren't getting enough sleep, it's because they're not getting deep restorative sleep. Either because they have some underlying sleep disorder, such as sleep apnea, which
Mhm.
can prevent you from entering the deepest stages of sleep, or they're just not setting them up for a good situation for getting good sleep. Like, let's use you as an example, or I can use myself as an example when you're downrange. Like, you either get the best sleep of your life, like after a mission and you've exhausted your body, and your mind, or you get really shitty sleep because you're sleeping next to a flight line. Like
Yep.
So that lack of quality sleep definitely affects your endocrine system, your gastrointestinal system, your cognitive capabilities, the ability of your brain to clear waste, even like your entire body. You build up these toxins due to the stress of being awake during the day, and all of that is flushed out with quality sleep. So if you're not getting it, you hold on to that stress essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, that everything and why we sleep is very realistic.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that shocked me too, aside from the impacts to you physically and from a cognitive standpoint, was they said even athletes who didn't sleep well would have a higher injury rate than athletes that did sleep well.
Yeah, so that's actually a lot of it has to do with testosterone levels. So actually, the team I worked with back at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research,
Mhm.
they just came out with a study where we were part of like some like night ops training exercises that the Rangers were doing, and again showed a direct correlation between lack of good quality sleep and declines and testosterone levels, and that's been shown before in army units. It's been shown in young healthy males, and it makes sense because when you enter the deep stages of sleep, which we call stage 3 non-rapid eye movement sleep, and then REM, which is rapid eye movement sleep, uh, those are triggers for the release of anabolic processes. So if you don't enter those stages because of, again, an underlying sleep disorder, or you're sleeping in a very noisy environment,
Mhm.
you'll never release testosterone, growth hormone, insulin growth factors, all those things that help with anabolic processes are triggered by entering these deep stages of sleep.
Wow. Well, I think that's a good bridge. The next thing I had in my notes to ask you about was the importance of REM and non REM sleep. Seems like the media loves REM. That's all they talk about. But
Yeah.
can you just take the audience through what the difference is and why they're both important?
Sure. So I like to think of non REM sleep as the act of physical restoration,
Mhm.
and REM sleep as the act of mental restoration. I think part of the reason REM sleep gets a lot more respect is because of like the cognitive restoration that happens during REM. So this is when uh, the the neural connections within your brain are refined, and it sort of filters out the unnecessary and keeps the necessary information from things you've learned. So this is where the skill acquisition and memory encoding happens is during REM sleep, so that you could effectively recall and retain that information the next day and thereafter. I think another reason why REM sleep gets a lot of importance is, why I love or I appreciate the hacking that Tim Ferriss and a few others have sort of engineered. It's because of that crazy multiphasic sleep schedule, which it is not work for long-term health and longevity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why REM sleep gets a lot of hype, is because of that as well. So that's REM sleep, mental
Mm-hmm.
restoration. But stage 3 non-REM sleep, again, this is where the anabolic processes are happening is during that.
What are some of the common sleep faults that you see with folks that you work with?
So I think the biggest thing is going to bed at an early enough time. I think it's so easy now, especially during COVID, right? Is because or the pandemic, is we've sort of been on this like free running schedule where we go to bed later and we sleep in later. And that might work in the beginning in terms of like catching up on like actual sleep loss from years of chronic sleep deprivation. But the thing that happens is the later you delay bedtime, the more you run the risk of not getting good quality sleep. And the reason is because our sleep patterns are controlled by these internal biological clocks,
Mm-hmm.
in addition to changes in the light and dark schedule. So, you know, for as much as you try to sleep after the sun rises in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
chances are you're not going to get the best quality sleep possible. You're just going to get, some of the lighter stages of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's important to go to bed early, is you can maximize your total sleep time, but you're also maximizing your quality.
Mm-hmm.
Because at night when we sleep, these pre-programmed clocks drop our core body temperature. And the lower our core body temperature is, the greater the likelihood that we're going to be in these deeper restorative stages of sleep.
Makes sense. Well, I think sometimes, right, we find ourselves in environments where we're going to be sleep deprived, to your point, in combat, or even a less extreme example, being a new parent, right? You're
Yep.
not going to be able to be on a good schedule. Quality sleep's probably going to escape you. Are there ways to minimize some of the damage temporarily?
Yeah. So these are all strategies that the military has effectively developed. Since this is a podcast where your demographic are dads, I will say that you are at a biological disadvantage when it comes to parenting, because one of the things that happens with moms, right, is it's evolutionary biology. Like, their biology adapts to the act of having a baby.
Mm-hmm.
So their endocrine system knows that I have to be awake more often, and the body will adapt to that. But you're not going to get that as a dad, right? Because
Right.
you didn't have the kid.
Yep.
So you as a consequence, like, I feel like dads are often more sleep deprived than moms because
Mm-hmm.
they don't have that physiological compensation. I'm sure there's a lot of moms like hating me and rolling their eyes right now, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So one of the things that we have sort of pioneered and sort of advocated, and it's been very popular recently in the military, is aggressive napping. So relying on that 10-15 minute opportunity throughout the day to nap,
Mm-hmm.
or when you have that opportunity to sleep in and load up on sleep, take advantage of that. So one of the things about sleep, and this is like a cheesy analogy, but it's so true, is it's like a checking account or a bank account, where the more you take out, the more you have to put back in, and the more you put in, the more you can take out. So if you're putting more sleep in on the front end, you can take more out on the back end. And we know this from doing like these sleep banking studies, as we call them, with soldiers over the years, where if we let individuals load up on sleep, so instead of sleeping a normal 8 hours a night, they're sleeping 9.5 hours a night. When you expose these people to, let's say, like 24-hour operations where they're just physically or cognitively active for this whole 40, 50 hours awake, their performance during this time is actually stable. Like they might have little dips in their performance, but because they front loaded their sleep on the front end, their like declines in performance with sleep deprivation are almost minimal.
Wow. Yeah, that's it's very interesting. I never thought you could front load sleep and, but the naps piece makes sense. In your opinion, is it a matter of just understanding that needs to be a priority in whatever circumstance you're in?
Yeah. So, I think even the military now, like we're embracing napping. It's taken years to get there. We, a few years ago, we wrote this editorial for a fairly well-regarded medical journal where we challenged the workplace stigma of napping. And it was actually in response to us wanting to get napping pods for our soldiers back in DC. And it was not heavily favored by senior military leaders. So we took their quotes and anonymously published them with, little excerpts and paragraphs about evidence for why that was like an ignorant response. And, we got our napping pods after that. So I think, people are now embracing the nap, and it took, people like Matt Walker to write Why We Sleep, and Arianna Huffington to, see these very accomplished, highly successful people contribute their success to getting good quality sleep. I mean, I'm the same way. I mean, I'm nowhere close to like Arianna Huffington, but like, I attribute early on embracing sleep as to why I've been such a successful athlete, and then also like a really good student.
Yeah, but and I completely agree. And it was hard for me being a combat arms Army officer, right?
Yep.
I grew up with a lot of those old school people where sleep was the last priority of work, and it didn't matter what was going on. But I think it's the same in like Silicon Valley, right?
Yep.
If you're a young professional, sleep is kind of seen as you being weak in some cases. But I do feel like with all the literature coming around, people are starting to see the benefits. So it's a really cool thing to watch.
Yeah, I think, it doesn't help. Like, obviously, I'm a huge advocate for this space exploration and everything. It doesn't help when you have executives like Elon Musk, who is an anti-sleeper, right? And, part of me believes it's because he is genetically blessed and has a short sleep gene where he can do that. But 98% of the population doesn't. And so, you have to just remind people based on your own success that why sleep is so important. Because I still have the same issue in the military. Like there's so many leaders that I interface with who, still roll their eyes when here come the scientists trying to study their sleep. But we did have some success recently. So we helped write the new training manual for the Army, FM 7-22. There's a whole chapter 11, it's devoted to sleep. And we put about napping and giving soldiers the opportunity to nap. And it's taken off in the media. It got a lot of coverage by major media outlets at the level of the Pentagon. It made me very, very happy when the Sergeant Major of the Army called us out, and praised us for including this aggressive napping in terms of helping soldiers be better soldiers.
Yeah, no, it's all good work. And I'm excited that you guys are going against the grain and trusting in the science. Um, I, I think one thing that everyone leans on when it comes to lack of sleep is caffeine, right?
Yep.
Whether you're a coffee drinker like me or a tea drinker, how do we best leverage caffeine day to day?
Excellent question. So caffeine is a beautiful drug. So much so I have the neurochemical structure adenosine, which is the neurochemical caffeine blocks,
Okay.
tattooed right here on my forearm. So I've done a lot of caffeine research over the years with my colleagues back at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. And caffeine is great. First, it depends on the source.
Mhm.
So energy drinks are bad. Without getting into the specifics, they can cause neurotoxicity. And we've done a study to show that 2 or more energy drinks a day can significantly increase your risk for PTSD, depression, and anxiety. And this is done actually in an entire division of soldiers. So not a brigade, a battalion, an entire division. Okay,
Wow.
so it's a legit finding. So there's that element. Source matters. Coffee, it's neuroprotective. It's an antioxidant. As long as you're not adding too much cream or sugar.
Mm-hmm.
But you can use something like coffee, and if you are spacing it out where you're having no more than, say, like 2 cups, which is about 200 milligrams every 3 to 4 hours, and you're stopping 6 to 8 hours before bedtime, like there's no harm in using that to like sustain and stabilize your performance. And if you aren't a coffee drinker, like it can be a performance enhancer too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so one of the things I do use is I don't recommend pre-workout on a daily basis. We've done studies to show that your body doesn't really respond to caffeine in more than increments of 200 milligrams at a time. Okay. And most pre-workout drinks have like 500 milligrams. So, but you could use like a pre-workout if you normally don't take it before you're doing like a really high intensity anabolic workout like Fran. Mm-hmm. I do it all the time in competition. Like if I know we're doing this workout where I have to go ham for like 5 or 6 minutes, I will use it, but mm-hmm. otherwise I won't.
Okay. And for those who don't know, if I'm going to Starbucks and I want to target 200 milligrams of caffeine, what size coffee am I normally getting?
So that would be a grande, because I believe the grande coffee has 180 milligrams of caffeine.
Okay. And for our Dunkin' folks, that's a medium.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Well, I don't know. Dunkin' is pretty weak coffee, so it's probably a little large.
Okay. Noted.
Yeah.
Oh, love it. Love it. What's the point of diminishing returns, right? So if you're not getting enough sleep, you're kind of bridging the gap with caffeine. Is it a certain number of days? Is it a dosage?
Yes. Did you like pre-read some of the studies you've done at Walter Reed, or?
I listened to the Sigma Nutrition podcast.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So the point of diminishing returns is 3 days, and that's across the board. So we've done studies over the years. Like one of the more commonly adopted protocols we use when we're trying to understand how sleep deprivation affects the human body is it's five hours a day for 7 days. Mm-hmm. And whether we've done the study or our colleagues have done the study, it's the same results. So if we're talking about testosterone, there's a study done 20 years ago. It's been repeated since, where 3 days into sleeping 5 hours a night, the mm-hmm. testosterone level of healthy males was cut in half to 50%. And it wasn't until these males got 8 hours of sleep again that it resumed to baseline levels. It's the same thing with mental performances. We did a study a few years ago to show that there's this huge decline in mental performance, specifically reaction time. And so like areas of vigilance, attention, and your ability to like just quickly and accurately process simple information. It degrades significantly after 3 days, and no amount of caffeine at that time is able to rescue performance. And in fact, if for people who like did well on caffeine with caffeine prior, they did even worse with caffeine like after the fact. And it wasn't until these individuals got sleep again, 8 hours of quality sleep again, that their performance was back to normal baseline levels. So yeah, it only takes 3 days, which makes you realize, I haven't done a full deployment like you, but like it makes you realize in those 9 months of just spinning wheels every day and getting 4 or 5 hours here, especially you as a combat arms officer, like what that did to your, like officer skills and the ability to make decisions.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So 3 days, I think, is the key takeaway, right? You can bridge the gap for a little bit, but after 3 days, to your
That's
point,
all
you're
it
spinning
takes.
your wheels.
It's not 3 weeks, it's 3 days.
Good deal. Well, we did have some questions come in from our audience before this recording. So I figured, there's quite a few of them. If we could take 1 to 2 minutes and touch on most of them.
Sure.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. The first one I really related to, how should we look at balancing sleep and sacrificing it to other value-added activities, such as going to the gym or perceived value-added activities? I think that's a tough one, right?
Oh, I love that question. So that's actually targeted towards the 5 a.m.ers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you are, it goes back to what we were talking about, anabolic processes happening with sleep. So if you're shortchanging your sleep and you're going to the gym and doing a WOD, or say you're on a strength program or squatting cycle, why are you doing that? Like, why bother doing the squatting cycle when you're not sleeping and you're not going to get anabolic recovery? Like, it's a moot point, right? So that's how I feel when if it's in regards to performance gains. It's the same thing, I think, professionally too. In your job, like say you have a very highly cognitively demanding job. If you are sacrificing sleep to do your job better, you're not going to do your job well at all. So now if it's just like mundane thing, like I shouldn't say mundane, but it's just like making some time for family. Like, yeah, I understand. But there's ways around it too, right? Like you're not going to stay up an extra 2 hours after bedtime. Like maybe make it 30 minutes. There's a sweet spot with 30 to 45 minutes of shortchanging your sleep. But just make sure that 30 or 45 minutes is super engaging, and it's not being wasted, like being present with somebody and being on your phone.
Okay, makes sense. Next one is, how do sleep medications impact your sleep and ability to hit REM?
Yes, I love that question. So another thing that we've actually gotten rid of, you might remember when you were deployed, is, did you ever get a prescription of Ambien or Lunesta on the long haul flight over?
I didn't, but I know people who did.
Yeah. So we stopped doing that because basically you are operating as somebody who is legally intoxicated, if not worse, taking one of those drugs, because they have a really long half-life and they basically knock you into a state of unconsciousness that is not actually restorative sleep. So that's how I feel about most sleep medications. There are some milder ones you can take. There's this one called Sonata. If you have a long haul flight, I will take it sometimes. It has an hour-long half-life. So that's good if you want to catch some shut-eye on the plane. And there's a new one out there called Belsomra. It acts on a very specific neurochemical system of the brain, but there's been mixed reviews about how effective it is. So I don't really, in general, advocate for sleep medications. Honestly, we use sleep medications as a last resort. There's multiple things you can do, changing your sleep routine. There's this therapeutic protocol called cognitive behavioral therapy that has been shown to be very effective in changing people's sleep habits. And there's certain natural supplements that you can take, such as valerian root, magnesium, and melatonin as well.
What about GABA?
Okay. So GABA is, if you're taking like an over-the-counter GABA, I advocate for just taking GABA alone. The problem with a lot of these newer age supplements is they include everything but the kitchen sink.
Right.
And sleep is a multifaceted process that involves many chemical systems. And so when you're sort of targeting and sprinkling a little bit here and a little bit there, it's not going to be overly effective. So I don't see any harm in taking just like a straight over the counter, like nutraceutical GABA. But it's all what works for you. Like GABA might not work for you, just like melatonin doesn't work for some people. So, but never take GABA in the form of Ambien or Lunesta, again, if it's the last resort. So both of those are GABA agonists. It's just there's too much of the agonizing, and it can be a recipe for disaster.
Okay. And then you said valerian root. Is there a dosage?
Valerian root is, I want to say it's 300 milligrams.
Okay.
But hold on, I don't take valerian root, but I mean, whatever's on the label is the, so it's between, 450 is the dosing I'm seeing online based on one of these empirical peer-reviewed articles.
Okay. It's all good. Then the next one would be kind of similar to the previous question. What's the impact of alcohol on your body and your brain before bed?
So, excellent question. I actually did my PhD on the effects of alcohol and cocaine separately on sleep and wake systems. So if you are minimizing your alcohol to like 1 drink or 2 drinks, like 2 glasses of wine, it shouldn't have a significant impact on your sleep. But anything more than 2 drinks will definitely impact your sleep. What it does is, you might fall asleep quicker, but it creates insomnia once the alcohol is metabolized from your body. And then it does interfere with the recovery processes too, like those anabolic recovery processes. I actually didn't realize how much it interferes with them until I started being on the Whoop strap. So I noticed that like my recovery would just tank anytime I had like 2 or more drinks. So, there's some truth to that too. I guess what I'm trying to say, and I know this because I've spent a lot of years doing research on the impact of alcohol and sleep, is if you're going to drink, like day drinking is the best. Even if you have more than like 2 drinks, by the time you go to bed, like you're probably not going to have many issues.
Okay.
Yeah. Sounds
good. Netflix before bed, and I guess blue light in general.
Yeah.
I've read a lot about it. It impacts your sleep in a negative way.
So it impacts your sleep because it directly stops the release of melatonin, melatonin's produced and released by the pineal gland. Okay. And the pineal gland has an innervation or connection with the retina. And so that light information travels from the retina through a tract and interferes with melatonin release. So that's why you shouldn't watch TV or be on your phone or be in the presence of blue light before bed. Actually, my friend is giving me shit today because I have, you can see right here, I have blue, like LED blue lights on my Christmas tree. Also probably not a good idea, but, in the Christmas spirit,
Right.
we'll make an exception. But anyway, yeah, so blue light's bad, but the reason Netflix is also bad, or I should say, like any high level activity is not good before sleep. Like the point of sleeping is to like ease your way into it. That's why there's these breath exercises that exist that people do before bed, and why people like just try to put away work and everything is you're watching a highly engaging, enthralling show on Netflix, it's going to affect your sleep. Even if you have all the filters, right? You have the blue light blocking glasses, you have the filtered screen, it's still going to affect your sleep because of the psychological aspect of it.
Okay. Yeah, that was my next question about blue blocking glasses and how effective they were.
I mean, they're effective as long as you're not doing something that's highly engaging. But I think that's the trade-off is like people think, oh, I'm filtering out the blue light so I can do something highly engaging. No, it's still going to affect your sleep just as much, if not more.
Okay. Noted. Next question is, I live in the north and seem to have issues falling and staying asleep during winter. Is this normal? And if so, how can I mitigate this?
Yes, it's very normal. It doesn't matter if we like live in modern society or there's still Aboriginal tribes that live based on sunrise and sunset schedules. Seasons affect your sleep, and the human physiological systems adapt accordingly, just like they do in other animals. One way to mitigate it is actually blue light exposure. So, especially people who find themselves to be very sensitive to darkness during the day. I know I'm one of those people. I did most of my schooling up in the Northeast, where I would go to track practice at 3, and it was already dark outside. Because up in like Boston and up in the Northeast, it can start very early.
Right.
And then the sun would rise at like 10. But you could use blue light like in the morning, because blue light is very wake promoting. There's a reason why those new technologically advanced lighting systems that are being installed in every corporate industry building except the military. The military, we love our poorly lit tactical operating cells and just really the shittiest light quality you could ever possibly have, right?
Right.
They haven't listened to us yet in that regard. We're working on it though.
Yep, give them some time.
Yep. But yeah, light matters. Blue light is great during the day. And to address the question with waking up in the middle of the night, this might be a good time to use some of those, nutraceutical sleep supplements. Actually, even beyond that, like I actually just started experimenting with a weighted blanket. I have a friend, he started it's a recovery company. It's called Rooster. They create these like ergonomic pillows to sort of position yourself in a good place for when you're sleeping. And so now actually here's his weighted blanket right here.
Okay.
I think that's been a new thing. There's something about like the somatosensory nature of having this weighted blanket on you that like somehow coaxes you into like sleeping better. It's the same thing with sound machines too. So I used to think sound machines were a gimmick. And then there was a study that came out in a very prestigious scientific journal by a very prestigious university showing how specific sound waves can activate one of the systems responsible for maintaining sleep at night. And so sound machines work as well.
Wow. Well, what about something like vitamin D?
Okay, so vitamin D, I'm not sure why it became a thing with sleep per se, but vitamin D, as we know, especially in the era of COVID, is great for immune health, right?
Hmm.
So if you think about it from that perspective, if your immune system is great, you're going to sleep great. If you have a cold, or, like one of the worst things about being sick is you can't sleep. Like,
Hmm.
and even when you are sleeping, you're like very groggy, and
Right.
it's not good restorative sleep. So that's where I feel like the relationship with vitamin D exists. It's not directly like triggering your sleep system per se.
Okay.
It's a like indirect relationship.
Okay. And then the Rooster company, your friend's
Yes.
company, we can link to that in the notes if folks are interested as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's he has an Instagram page. Let me get it for you. It's yeah, he's done a wonderful job just sort of he's consulted with me and a few other friends and just like immersing himself in the literature. Yes, it's called Rooster Recovery. So they're on Instagram. It's rooster.recovery. And this is sort of their new venture is looking at like sleep promoting products. So
Okay.
yeah.
Very good. I'll make sure that gets in the notes there. The next question is, I find myself getting up to pee in the middle of the night. Is this a major interruption to my ability to sleep and recover? And if so, should I somewhat dehydrate myself before bed?
Oh, we get that question all the time. So it's okay if you're waking up in the middle of the night to go pee. The issue people have is they turn on the light. So, as we just talked about, turning
Yep.
on the light is a bad thing. And that's
Hmm.
why people can't get back to sleep, because it doesn't matter if the light is on for 10 seconds or 2 hours, it has the same effect on how the body responds to that. Like, I know this because this is what I used to do all the time when I
Hmm.
was a PhD student, is like we would blast animal models with like short pulses of light and just watch their physiology be like completely unraveled by it.
Wow.
So that's probably where this issue is. I think like you should be hydrating before bed because you're spending 8 not hours not drinking, and your body when you sleep does release antidiuretic hormone to prevent you from waking up in the middle of the night, but it's inevitable. Like you're going to
Hmm.
wake up, especially if you hydrate before properly.
Okay. Makes sense. And then the last question, do you have any experience with lucid dreams, what they are and
Yes.
how they differ from other dreams?
Yes, I actually I feel like you either use it or lose it. So about 5% of the population can lucid dream.
Okay.
Um, I 5% consistently. Me, I'm more like inconsistent. So there's in these individuals, it's genetically regulated in sort. There's something about like having a naturally occurring mutation of one of the serotonin receptors in the brain that makes some people able to lucid dream, which makes sense because uh, people who take hallucinogens, which are like saturate the serotonin system,
Hmm.
lucid dreaming is very common when people are using psilocybin and LSD and all those things. But yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing unless you're having like these traumatic experiences, right? So I know I'm kind of envious of people who can lucid dream consistently.
I had never heard of it until I got the question. So,
Oh yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like because usually the dreams are like incredibly vivid too.
yeah. Okay. Well, that does it for our questions. If folks want to get a hold of you or any content that you've been featured in, where should they go?
So two places. First, I do have a popular science book. I wrote it after um, we went to the games the first time in 2000. 13. It's called Meathead, Unraveling the Athletic Brain.
Okay.
And it's you can buy it on Amazon, or I think it's in the Barnes & Noble bookstore too. But it sort of debunks this myth of the dumb jock. So it talks about like all these amazing plastic changes that happen to the brain with exercise, and sort of dives into the literature in terms of like what separates an elite athlete from an amateur in terms of I'm not talking like psychological mindset. I'm talking like actual neuroanatomical and like physiological changes that you can identify as somebody as elite or not elite.
Okay.
And then it's also like the second half is more of this like performance recovery manual in terms of like I have a whole chapter devoted to sleep and jet lag and how to combat it. And then the last chapter talks a lot about like using like legal stimulants and like, sleep recovery promoting drugs in order to augment performance. So that's my book, Meathead. And then you can find me on Instagram. I do post a lot of, like scientifically relevant posts. It's at Doc Jock, ZZZ. So DOCJOCK ZZZ. And you can also ask me a question there. I'm pretty active on Instagram, especially with my current Army job. That's a huge part of it. Is we're on social media. It's a blessing and it's a curse because I have like the highest levels of, not that I like have anything inflammatory on my social media, but like I have a 2-star general who like our commanding general like watches my
Follows
Instagram
you.
story. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
it's like,
Right.
to be careful when I post on my stories too.
Right. It's like when your mom and dad follow you on the Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. And, in recent months, I've had to try my best to stay apolitical and all that stuff. So yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, I will link to your book and your Instagram page in the notes so, people have an easy time finding you. Well, good stuff. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast and sharing your expertise. I know I'm better for it. Lots of other people will as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. And, maybe if I don't deploy here in the next few weeks, hang out next time I'm in Chicago. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. Yeah. So if it does happen, good luck on your upcoming deployment as well.
Thank you. Yes. It's my way to escape the let's become normal now in 2020 and 2021.
There you go. All right, Major Brager. Thank you.
Thank you.